Good day to you. Today marks a turning point in the class because we are more than halfway done with the class. So congratulations on your more than halfway point in media criticism. I took a look at the class roster today, and one of the things that jumped out to me, sort of, is that there are 12 females in the class out of 20 students overall in the class. I think I have 20. Some students haven't been turning in work, so I'm not quite sure, but we definitely have more females than males in the class. And I say I'm sort of not surprised because that's generally the way it is at ESU. Yeah, there are more females attending ESU than males. It used to be around 60%. I'm not sure what it is after the pandemic. And that's also the case, by the way, at most universities across the U.S., that most universities have more females than males, and females are graduating at better rates than males as well, which is to say that males are dropping out of college more often than females. So it makes sense that females are going to be the ones in the workforce who are making the most money, right? No. If you're a female, you probably already know that on average, a female who performs the same job as a male, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is only making 84 cents to every dollar that a male makes, comparing the same positions, but the female is earning only 84 cents. So that introduces our subject for today. We're taking on feminist analysis. It's kind of like Marxism in a way, in that it's not just an analytical perspective, it is also a political project. It's a political project that tries to explore how women and men, as we will shortly show, men too, excuse me a moment, how both women and men are disempowered, but mainly women. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Now let's talk about the whole concept of males versus females. Because as you may already know, that concept is in fact a socially constructed concept. It's a socially constructed concept, maleness and femaleness. And we learn from very early ages in the United States, for example, that men, boys, should be wearing blue and girls should be wearing pink. Now that's a very simple way of looking at this stereotyping that goes on in our culture to reinforce what it means to be a male or female. But there is some truth to it. And it's different than, for example, in Mexico, where pink is a celebrated male color. So the way that we act as males and the way that we act as females also is shaped by our culture. And that's very different, maleness and femaleness, from our gender of sex, our gender, which is what sex is about. So sex is about whether you're born with male genitals or whether you're born with female genitals, whereas gender is a socially constructed term. And we know that gender is a fluid concept today. In other words, there's no such thing as somebody who's just completely male in their behavior and somebody who is completely female in their behavior. That in fact, there's a continuum. And some people have male aspects of their behavior, as is socially defined, and some people have female aspects. If you're a male and you cross your legs when you sit, for example, would be an example of something that's occurring that's socially defined as a female characteristic that's on that scale. Within this field that we're studying today, feminism, one of the most important concepts that we take on is essentialism. Essentialism is the belief that gender distinctions are innate, that they are naturally occurring, and that's what we're trying to tear down today, is this notion of essentialism, because feminist analysis is a political project. Feminist analysis also takes a look at patriarchy. You know what patriarchy is, right? That's the Latin word for father figure, right? So patriarchy is subordinating women's interests to men. It's where an organization is ruled not only by men when it comes to media, which we'll be examining later in the class, but also the way that the reporting structure takes place is through a male perspective. We'll talk more about that as well. So ultimately what we're taking a look at today is how media texts produce perceptions of gender. How media texts are inviting us to believe, if you want to look at it rhetorically, to believe as to what is an appropriate way to act if you are, quote, male or female. So let's take on the first major concept in the chapter. It's stereotyping. Stereotyping, and we've defined that already in this class, as reducing a person to a single characteristic. It's not that it's untrue, it's just saying that they are all about being a country music fan, that they are all about being a video gamer. It's reducing somebody and all the traits that go with it to just that single characteristic. Stereotypes, though, are also produced by a male-controlled system of beliefs. And that is because we have a society that until recently, very recently, didn't even have the right for women to vote. And certainly not for women to exercise certain rights that males have in the workforce when it comes to having children. And so women are still trying to gain those rights in our society. And that means we need to take a look at how that repression is still taking place, and that's the purpose. And so what we look at when we look at stereotypes is we look at some binaries, and that's a key term that comes along with feminism. It will also be part of the next perspective that we study next class, which is queer analysis. So binaries is a way of looking at the world by dividing it into either or. And what we're trying to do with feminism and queerism is to smash those binaries so that we have a more sophisticated understanding of how gender is constructed. So the first binary that we're trying to smash is the active-passive binary. Here our society has told us that men are the active ones. They are playing sports. They are driving powerful cars and motorcycles. They are using tools. It's a male who is in the action. That's what's going on in our society many times, as is portrayed through media content, whereas women are portrayed passively. Women are portrayed as sitting or standing. Women are portrayed as focusing on beauty. Women are portrayed often as being underweight, at least in media. This is depictions of a woman as a receiver of action, a passive person rather than being active. So we're going to smash that binary with feminist analysis. The next binary we're going to try and take down is the public/private binary. Public/private binary, essentially men are portrayed in our culture and through our media as being providers, as being the working person in the house, the breadwinners. And therefore these people must leave the house and go out and collect the resources that keep the house going, financial resources or equipment resources or food resources. That's how the male is portrayed. Whereas the woman is portrayed as more private. The woman is the nurturer. She's in the household with children. She's the domestic manager. She handles the finances within the house, but outside of the house, that's the male's domain. Of course, these are really classic old stereotypes that have been in the process of being broken down. I am portraying something going way back in time, 50s, 1800s, 1600s, and we've made changes, but still there is a kernel of truth, and that's the point to a stereotype. Let's talk about the third binary, and that is the logical/emotional binary, wherein men are portrayed as being the logical ones. They reason their way through subjects. They are problem solvers. They don't let emotion get in the way like women. Women are portrayed as emotional and therefore not logical, not rational, not reasonable. They let emotions get the better of them, and often those emotions are tied with a criticism about a woman being in the middle of a menstrual cycle or a certain point in the cycle, which is therefore causing the woman to have emotions that she is not in control of. Only women can decide that for themselves. We're talking about the binary here. And then finally, we have the binary of sexual versus sexual object. And this is where men are portrayed as sexual pursuers. They are the ones who ask a woman out on the first date. They are the ones who ask the woman to get married. They are the ones who start to try and take the clothes off of another woman if there's going to be sexual contact between the two. They are the ones, in essence, who are making it happen. They are the sexual ones, whereas the woman is the object. The woman is the one being pursued. The woman is the one being touched. The woman is the one who is being embraced by the male. The woman is the one who is offering up something that the male wants. There's a very interesting quote I'm going to invite you to read by the French philosopher, a playwright as well, Simone de Beauvoir, female, on page 202. She's got an excellent quote. I'm going to invite you to read that for yourself. She says the female, in essence, is more admired because the female gives birth to both sexes. The female is responsible for every male and every female in this world. And the male is too, but it's the female's body that produces that. Therefore, the female has a greater appreciation, Beauvoir says, because of this cross-gender, cross-sex attraction that is naturally going to be there, because without the female, there are no human beings. Of course, without the male as well, but the female is the one who provides the body. Advertising is particularly unequal in the area of sexual versus sexual object binaryism because advertising sexualizes women much more than men are sexualized. Men are sexualized. You look at any beer commercial, any car commercial, you can see sexuality going on, but it tends to be more from the point of view of portraying the woman as an object. And this is not to say that women are not portrayed differently in other media around the world. I'd like you to know, for example, that women are naked in commercials in France for commercials for products like deodorant. They'll show a woman in a shower. She gets out of the shower and using the deodorant as she normally would. She's going to be topless maybe, and they will show that. And that's a different way of depicting a female than depicting a female in an action adventure film where she's being pursued by a male and grabbed by a male or swooped down on by a male or saved from a train by a male. It's a different kind of thing under this binary. Now let's move to a particular period of time and also an academic movement that goes along with it. It's called post-feminism and media representation. Post-feminism and media representation. Essentially, the scholarship in this area started to move away from focusing on how women were oppressed as they were before they were allowed to vote, as they were before they had rights that men have, and still we have various countries around the world where if a woman commits infidelity in many Middle Eastern countries, the penalty is much harsher than for men. You can be stoned, hit with stones in Iran, for example, if you are proven to have committed infidelity. We're moving away from that kind of look at women, and we're shifting more to how women can be empowered. And so we're going to look at three waves here now and talk about how feminism as a political movement and an academic area of study has evolved. So we got the first wave. And the first wave, it's in the 19th century and the 20th century. And you know that means the 1800s and the 1900s, right? So the 1800s and the 1900s, we had female activists like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. You recognize that name, Susan B. Anthony? She's on the American dollar. We have a dollar with Susan B. Anthony. There aren't that many of them in circulation, which kind of speaks to a good example of discrimination against women right there. The money that's supposed to have Susan B. Anthony on it, you don't even get your hands on most of your lives. So, but they fought, both of them, Elizabeth and also Susan, they fought for the right for women to vote, which they finally gained in 1920. Just 100 years ago, women have been able to vote or thereabouts. That wave gave way to a second wave. A second wave is in the 1970s, and here you have activists like the females Gloria Steinem, who's still alive, and Betty Friedan. And both of these, Betty and Gloria, they fought for workplace rights. So in other words, women were to have good conditions of work, good lighting in the workplace, that they were allowed to take breaks so that they could stretch their back. Lots of things having to do with workplace rights, but also reproductive rights, and it's in the 1970s when we get Roe v. Wade, which is a Supreme Court decision which legalized abortion. This is all within this time period, the second wave of feminism. During this time period, this wave, I remember, got up the ERA movement, the Equal Rights Amendment. And what that was all about was making it the law of the land that women had to be paid equally and treated equally. But it never got passed because our Constitution requires 2/3 of state legislatures to pass an amendment to the Constitution. That's what they were fighting for, an ERA amendment. Like we have the First Amendment, they wanted the ERA amendment. It never got 2/3 of the state houses, so that particular movement fizzled out. That brings us now to the third wave now. The third wave is looking at the role of gender in relation to identity. It's not just about whether a person is a female or not. It's also about what race they are. So if you're female and you're a black female, then you have extra double discrimination in many cases. And also class is something that is looked at. And also disability is something. If you're a black female who has a disability, then there are other issues having to do with media representation and equality. So that's what the third wave is all about. And we focus a lot on the media. We're looking at media and how they are depicted, media representation, in other words. Rosalind Gill is an author in this area, a researcher in this area, and she comments on the post-feminist girl. That's what we're in now, post-feminism, right? Third wave. Post means after. And that's a girl with a hairless body everywhere, just about, if you know what I mean, a slim waist, firm buttocks. In fact, there's even a new body style that is being talked about. My wife said to me, have you seen the new body style? I'm like, body style? Your body, you can be a style? I mean, you're born with your body, aren't you? You can develop it for sure through exercise and diet, but style, that's straight. Oh yeah, it's a very 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 slim waist, very big buttocks, very very slim structure to the face. I don't even know how you structure your face other than what you're born. That's what I'm talking about here. This is another way that in which women are objectified, right? Talked about as an object rather than a person. So that takes us to our final area of discussion for today, and that is consequences of what we're going to consider to be sexist media representation. Media representing women not in equal ways, not in ways that position them in ways that are contrary to the sides of the binaries that we went through earlier. These are the consequences of sexist media representation. It starts with the assumption that media texts do influence people, right? So we have to assume that that's the case. So one area that's a negative in our society is eating disorders. Eating disorders, it's well documented that women have more eating disorders than men. I am talking largely about anorexia and bulimia. Although men also have been known, some wrestlers have engaged in purging their body, anorexia and bulimia, to try and keep up with a body style, even if you're not so-called born with one, that is in keeping with how media say a woman's body should appear. So we've got that problem. The attractive people, generally speaking, have more slender figures, although we do see women of increasingly varying body styles in the media. We still have an overpreponderance of slender females, and women on TV are slimmer than men. There seem to be more overweight men, or men are heavier. There's more permission for men to be overweight on television. We also know that in the area of advertising for food encourages men and women to excessive eating. We eat, we are told, not because we are hungry. We eat for entertainment, and we eat for comfort. We even have a name for that, comfort food, right? I told you I'm in South Carolina. I passed a restaurant just last night called Comfort Food, making fun of just that. And I know inside that restaurant there's grits, there's gravy, there's biscuits, there's sausage, there's a lot of fried stuff. None of that is really that good for your health, but it tastes good to some people, and therefore it brings comfort. And that's what advertising encourages to do, and it encourages to pick up something because it looks good rather than, are we hungry? Is it the time to eat? Do we have a plan for after we eat to work off the food? Now, that's not what advertising is all about. All of this leads us, according to Ott and Mack, to end up with what can be called an Adonis complex. An Adonis complex. Adonis was the Greek god of beauty and desire. The Greek god of beauty and desire. And what they are saying is you end up being unhappy with dimensions of the way that you look as a male or a female, because that is what you are ending up with as a result by comparing yourself to people in media content. And so the end result is that you are unhappy. And I have seen surveys of women asking them if they are happy with their bodies. In my other class that I teach, Intro to Mass Media, the book that I use for the class, called Living in a Media World by Ralph Hansen, he cites a statistic that says 30 years ago, if you were to ask women if they were happy with their body, 25% of them said no, which is a lot, 1/4 saying they're not happy with their body. But today, that number is over 50%, 51% of women saying there is an aspect of their body that they're unhappy with. Think about that. That is truly profound, in my opinion, to live with that day in and day out. To what extent is it related to the media and media representation? That's for you to decide and work out for yourself, but that is exactly what feminism and feminist analysis is concerned with. Have a great day.